is here. We're grateful to have him. He is the co-founder of Atakama, which was acquired by DENA, I want to say Njimoku, but DENA in 2011. He was previously the founder of Penguin Holdings, he was the CEO of a seed fund from 2000 to 2002. He is also was the CEO and founder of Wanako Games, which was acquired by Vivendi in mid-2000. So let's give a big round of applause for Esteban. Come on up. Welcome. Is that working?
That's it. I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I was at an event last night, actually. There was a Manos. Has anybody heard of the Manos incubator that's kicking off? It's just for Hispanic youth in the US. And they played Pitbull when the companies came up. So I don't know. We didn't play Pitbull this morning, but I don't know what your intro song would be, but we didn't have it. Talk to us a little bit about, just tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, kind of what, as you came out of school, what you thought you would do.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for inviting me. Yeah, I'm originally from Argentina. I finished high school there, born and raised, and then I had the opportunity to come to school in the US. I did undergrad here in Virginia, and I graduated in 1996. And at the time, I mean, the word of the times was globalization. Some of you might not even heard of it, but some of you do. And it was essentially, starting, world economies were starting to integrate, and there was a lot of foreign investment in Latin America, and really a lot of kind of economic integration in Latin America. And in college, really, coming from Argentina, I really didn't know much about the rest of the countries. And in college, I got to know a lot of people from Chile, from Ecuador, from Mexico, Brazil, and it just became super exciting to see our commonalities and everything, all the opportunities that could be in bringing sort of cultures together. So I became very, very excited about the opportunity to kind of work across Latin America and to start bridging the gap between Latin America and the US. And that's been pretty much a common denominator throughout my career. And this is sort of the perfect reflection of that intention, this conference. So that's why I'm very excited to come here. In short form, after college, I started working in banking, working for Latin American funds, in Wall Street and some Latin American funds, and eventually led Penguin, which was a seed stage venture fund for Latin America, across Latin America. We funded around 22 companies in the region. And then I started my own company. And in my company, my first company was Wanako Games, and we developed in Latin America, but I was based in the US. So I've always been sort of trying to connect Latin American talent with the American audience and the American markets and world markets. I believe that's a huge opportunity.
Talk to us a little bit about Wanako Games. Why did you get into games to begin with? I worked in Electronic Arts for 4 years, and it's a tough business. I mean, it's a hit-based business. What drew you into that industry?
Very simply, the opportunity that I saw that there was a very large market that was expanding, was growing a lot, and there was nobody in Latin America doing it. I saw a lot of potential in our region. I saw the opportunity of, I knew that we had a lot of engineering talent, a lot of creative talent, but there was no one in Latin America producing games at a world scale. And I was seeing very successful companies around the world spread, even in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, obviously the main cities across Europe and North America. So I realized, why isn't there a single company from Mexico down to Ushuaia, essentially? And I saw the opportunity to break into a market with that talent. And it was a long and hard road, but we eventually did it. I mean, we were awarded with Game of the Year in 2006.
Which game was that?
It was called Assault Heroes for Xbox Live Arcade. We were launch title. We did another game, which was best-selling game for XBLA, the mini golf game, and then we were, as a result of that, got acquired by Vivendi Games, now Activision. So we kind of hit a lot of milestones in being the first company in South console, to get awarded Best Game of the Year, to get acquired. And it's been super exciting because eventually sort of a gaming community evolved around the countries, and it's been very, very exciting to see that grow.
And then so your talent, your engineers and your team was in South America, but your office was not, right?
Right.
You were based here in New York.
Yeah, that was based off, it was part of the original design. We wanted to have development in Latin America and leverage that talent base, but I knew that I wanted to penetrate an industry. I wanted to be connected. I wanted to be in the party where everybody was at, right? So I wanted to be connected to the movers and shakers in the industry. So I was always based in the U.S. I had and I replicated that in my second startup. Having a small commercial business development marketing team here, and all of my product development happening in Chile.
Well, this is very interesting because you have this. Everyone is here that's come from Latin America to Silicon Valley, right? Which is either thinking about following your model or just trying to make connections. If you had stayed in Buenos Aires or if you'd stayed in Latin America, would Vivendi have ever bought your company? How critical was it for you to be in New York City? Your development team wasn't, so it wasn't like they acquired your team. Your team did, I'm sure, relocate to France or something.
Right.
But could you have been acquired? You would have made the same games. You would have maybe still won a game of the year, but would your company have been bought?
It's tough to say because I didn't do it. I couldn't maybe test that, but most likely not. There's been cases of companies getting acquired with no presence in the U.S. But those entrepreneurs essentially live on planes. You need to be traveling all the time and being part of every event. It's much easier when you're here. Things just happen quicker. In Silicon Valley, connections, everybody loves connecting with each other. That's very much in the DNA of this place. So being here on a permanent basis, it just puts you top of mind of everybody else. So it's by far, super beneficial.
Well, let's talk about that. What do you find is special about this area of the world in particular? What makes Silicon Valley different from Latin America, or makes it different from the East Coast or wherever?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said already, but so it might sound like cliches, but I think it's true. There's a strong culture of collaboration. People love giving feedback to each other. People love connecting. Every meeting generates at the very minimum another meeting because everybody thinks, I should connect you with this, with that, with no interest, with no economic interest, more than helping each other because everybody's been helped, so everybody loves helping, and you do that, at the same time. So there's a huge, people are super open about showing their products, about opening up their strategies, and that's, how you generally take away most of the benefits of being here, just openly talking to people and connecting. There's clearly, a culture of risk taking and of trying to go for the stars. And there's a culture that calls for big ambitions of trying, and people truly believe that they can do it. So just thinking big and not being afraid of failure, which is really also a big part of the DNA of this place. Those are all things that really make this place unique.
Where do I start? I come here, I fly in, I'm excited, I'm here, I'm in Silicon Valley. What the freak do I do? Where can I possibly begin? I go up to Sand Hill and knock on doors. Do I, go hang out at meetups? What in the world? Where do you begin? Where did you begin? Maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, totally. So yeah, so Silicon Valley is a strange place, right? It's not Manhattan that there's an island and you see everybody there, or other place, or Miami and see South Beach. Here it's kind of spread all around between San Francisco and San Jose. So sometimes it's tough. It's kind of confusing to know where to go. Generally I would say if you come by yourself, if it's a small team, like most startups are, probably a good place to start would be a co-working space. Because that gives you right away the opportunity to, number one, feel a little bit part of a community because it's tough to be in your office by yourself. And secondly, you start connecting right away. These places generally have people just like you, and they can provide you services and connections. So I think starting in a co-working space is probably a smart idea. And then I think it's all about making connections with your industry and going to meetups, going to your industry specific events, and really it's part of being part of the community. Really is participating in all this in all these events.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I found is that I'm not from here. I'm from Florida, and I lived in Europe for 6 years and in New Zealand for 2 years. So I'm kind of a transplant similar to you. What I found is that as I have seen people come in and out of Silicon Valley, that there are some people that it seems like they're determined to be here, and then there are other people that act determined to be here, and then 6 months, 12 months, they disappear. They're just gone. And I find that the people that I continue to see over and over again, as you say, whether it's at TechCrunch this week or whether it's at some meetup or some event, but those people who don't go away, that there's a real power in just saying, like, I am going to make this happen and I'm not leaving until I figure it out. And, or maybe I'm just going to stay after that like you. And those people seem to, just that determination, they seem to break through, they seem to...
Absolutely. I think, things happen in serendipitous ways. Things happen out of nowhere. And, you never know where your best partnership is going to come from, where your exit opportunity is going to come from. So just being present, showing commitment. I think people, that's very true. I would say, people are, skeptical at first, or people just come here to hang out. They test, they like seeing how committed you are to the place. So being part of all of these events and being permanent here, you build that trust and really become top of mind. That I think it's huge when when they're thinking of, who should I call for this and that, they start contacting you and referencing you with all these people. That's how you start extracting all the value.
It's interesting too, like if we're talking and you're telling me about just 5 minutes ago about your experience, we have several people that we both mutually know, and that's incredible to me. This place is, Steve Blank always says that there are 40 people in Silicon Valley, and they just basically, everyone knows, those 40 people know everyone and everyone knows them. And it's very interesting to me that in a 5-minute conversation, that we can find these ties, and that's not uncommon. That's totally normal, right?
No, that's totally true. It's a small community. Definitely, there's sort of a tier one, kind of the visionaries and the mentors and the leaders of Silicon Valley. That's a very, very small group. It's a group that's very tough to penetrate at the same time. But even without being part of that group, and it's great to have some connections to that group, even without those type of connections, there's still there's a sort of second tier of much larger community of entrepreneurs that are super successful and super motivated and smart. But it is a very small community. And that's great, and it's scary at the same time, because you need to, it's great because it connects you right away with everybody. It's easy to start dropping connections, etc. It's easy to get connected, but at the same time, you need to be super professional and work well, really, because if not, things start, prestige is very important in this place.
What do you mean by that?
Just being considered somebody motivated, good, who can create good products, who's around, can hire talented people. It's important, and the opposite as well. If you don't do things right, the word spreads pretty fast, I would think.
Yeah. Talk to us about, let's assume I want to raise money. I've come to Silicon Valley. I'm trying to get soft tech VC. I'm trying to get K9 Ventures. I'm trying to get these SE Angel. I'm trying to get these guys' attention. How do I start? Where do I go? And give us some tips on kind of how I can get their attention, and then how do I close deals with those people?
Yeah. So in the how to approach them, I think it's still a little old-fashioned in the way that in the sense that recommendations are always the best way to get through them. As meritocratic and as this place is, which I think it's a lot, ultimately they receive tons and tons of mails. So if you get recommended by somebody they respect, that's really kind of, they're going to reply to your email most likely. It's absolutely okay to see, kind of go and see everybody, all the VCs. Actually, I would recommend that. I mean, if you're in the process of fundraising, instead of doing, a few VCs at a time, you should prepare a pitch and try to pitch it to as many as you can, because Silicon Valley tends not to like people who've been kind of fundraising mode for 6-9 months. The word gets out very fast because it is a very small community. The good news is that we've seen more and more exits with the hybrid model, being companies that have a small presence in the US, in Silicon Valley, but most of their development happens abroad. It used to be Skype, the big one. Recently we've seen Waze, $1 billion acquisition, developed essentially in Israel with a small team here. So you start seeing more and more of those hybrid models. There are other companies doing really, really well that are essentially being founded abroad, and most of their development happens abroad. I think VCs are starting to be really open about that model. So that's not a problem in raising money. The truth of the matter is, VCs here are very picky. They're not as risk taking as you would imagine. Actually, most of them kind of follow trends and follow each other, unfortunately. So, you definitely need, some traction. Ultimately, if you don't have a huge reputation and kind of a lot of trust from them, which is something invaluable once you gain that. After that, for everybody else, mortals in the world like ourselves, you just need to show traction, something very special, and some clear metrics that show why you're sort of ahead of the pack.
Yeah, you're talking about bumping into people, and I bumped into this guy, Madhu Kumar, yesterday, who runs K9 Ventures, a $40 million fund. It's just him. He's got no partners. And I said, how many investments do you make? And he was right in front of us for lunch, so we grabbed lunch together. And he said, I'll do 4 investments a year. 4. And he will look at hundreds of companies. And he said, those 4, I will do everything for them. But, here's a guy who's got $40 million to expend on capital to spend on startups. And he's so disciplined that he's only going to pick 4. It's just this, and you've got to be, if you're going to take money from those guys or get them to invest in you, you really do have to be the very best of the very best of the very best.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, if you're lucky enough to have options on how to raise money, really look more at the people that are behind the deal more than the brand name of the fund itself. The brand always helps, but really most of the value you're going to get is the money. It doesn't matter where it comes from. So after the money, the next best thing you can get is help, and that really depends on who from the fund is going to get involved with your company. If they're very excited about it, or they're just kind of tagging along another big group of investors, or if they're actually going to take a board seat or some advisory role where they can really help you. Because that's the other secret of Silicon Valley. There have been so many successes throughout the years that there's a lot of collective knowledge that gets transferred from one company to the next, right? So in the in the 90s, a lot of the great talent was formed at Yahoo, then eventually moved on to Google, then eventually moved on to Facebook, then Twitter, then the rest, right? And a lot of VCs are able to see sort of all those evolutions, and many actually been part of those companies as they've been evolving. So caring about the person is key, I think.
If you're going to raise money, you're trying to raise money, you talk about doing it quickly. If I try to sell Microsoft something, or if I try to sell Semantic something, it might take me between 9 and 12 months to sell it, and that sales cycle is probably going to be 6 to 12 months. With VCs, what does that sales cycle look like, do you think? And if I'm 6 months in and I'm still selling, am I screwed? What does that cycle look like?
Yeah, it's completely different from raising money and selling a product or service. When you're raising money, when they get excited, it's very visible from the beginning, and they tend to act very quickly. So you can get a sense of how excited they are, depending, if they're not replying emails, or you're not getting another meeting for another couple of months, that means probably they're just having you on the radar, but they're not that excited. You need to be very fast. everybody's seen, companies act literally in a couple of days from meeting to signing term sheets. Obviously, you need to have something super hot and that's exploding in terms of, explosion, in terms of metrics, of traffic, etc. But, sales process, generally I would say reserve, think that, from beginning to end, it's about, 3 to 6 months process. But really, the pitching process up to signing a term sheet, it shouldn't take more than a couple of months. And if it prolongs more than that, it means that you're not doing, you're not being successful. So we just kind of, back away, reconsider, maybe look for other, avenues to get the money, to transition the business, and then go back to them up with a new story, a little bit more further over.
Well, so let's say that happens. Let's say that happens to me. I go out, I pitch, I spend 3 or 4 months, I don't get any traction, no one wants to lead around, there's a little bit of interest. What do I do? Do I then need to go spend 3 months and redo the product? Do I need to find a new angle? I mean, what do I do in that scenario when I can't raise money with the idea that I've been working on?
So a couple of things. I mean, one is, which is not exactly what you asked, but related to that. I mean, by all means, keep everybody that you've been meeting in the loop of what you're doing. I mean, people here lab, you need to be top of mind means like not disappearing for another 6 months or a year and then showing up again. I mean, you need to keep people in the loop. Sometimes we're shy, say I don't want to bother him, but just kind of a quick email update. People appreciate it and they remember that, and that keeps you top of mind. What you specifically should do if you don't raise money, I mean, it depends a lot on your business. I would say definitely, try to build a new story. Ideally try to get the money out of other sources commercially, either, selling your product services, try to fund yourself in other ways. And, if you're going to come back, if your plan is to come back to the VCs, either have a new story to tell, which may be around the same product, but, a different commercial strategy or a different, a little bit of a pivot in terms of product. Or something new you found out about the user experience that position you differently, or ideally, come back when you have more traction, which is what most people will tell you, right? Which is the toughest one.
Yes, you talk about staying in touch with people, and I think this is such a huge thing, and building those relationships over time. That it's not, I think a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes the scenario of like coming in and a VC will sweep you off your feet and fund you in 3 days. Like we read about that in TechCrunch, right? But I think most people, that's not what happens. Most people it's just like over time, the VCs see